something or other in New York City. And my daddy said he lost a farm a day for 30 days. He lost everything. Our house burned down. Shortly after that, well, there's two stories got out about it. One is that my sister Clara did it herself. Another was that it was an accident. But she was home from school, my older sister, and she was doing some ironing on a kerosene stove, mighty unsafe and uncertain in those days. And somehow or other she caught fire. She ran around the house a few times before someone tackled her to the ground, but she died the next day. It was a few days later that my daddy caught fire. Oil lamp fell down on him. They tell a couple stories about that too around there. One is that he did it himself, and the other is that my mother did it to him. I always think he did it himself because he felt so bad about losing everything he'd worked for, such a nice life for his family, becoming a part of the world like that, and all of a sudden, busted. So it was too much for my mother's nerves or something. I don't know. I don't talk about it all that much. But she was taken on the train to the insane asylum in Norman, Oklahoma, where she died a while later. And the rest of us kids, my brothers Roy and George and my little sister Mary Jo, we was adopted out to various families around Okemah there. And Okemah had grown considerable because of the oil boom from 1,500 to about 6,000 or 7,000 people. But still wasn't much money there, much going on. And that's when I became a road man, rambling man, hobo, a bum, whatever you want to call it. I was 17 years old, and I just hit that dusty old highway. Traveled all around, went down to the Gulf of Mexico, did this and that. And then there was another oil boom up there in the high plains of Texas, where we're talking about, the great wheat belt around Amarillo. Flat as a griddle for 1,000 miles north to Canada. There's nothing but a barbed wire fence, and there ain't a barb left on it. Pampa was a oil-smeared, gasoline-soaked, whiskey-flavored, fast, wild boom town. My daddy was up there running a cot house, and I drifted on up that way. I got a job in a root beer stand. Supposedly, Shorty Harris, the fellow that owned it, paid me $2 or $3 a day, sell root beer. First day I was there, he said, "Now, Woody, something else." Feller comes in and lays down $1.50 on the counter. "You reach down here," and he pointed to some bottles of a different description. "You take one of these bottles and you put it gently but firmly on the counter." Well, you can guess what these bottles was. I was pure deal Jamaica ginger corn whiskey, home brew. You see, these was Prohibition days. I hated Prohibition. Fellers was drinking radiator alcohol and dying of rust poisoning. They were straining that old pink canned heat through a dirty rag and drinking that or dipping it with a sody cracker. And everybody was making some kind of home brew in an old rusty oil drum, and this stuff would give you the Jake leg or the beer head, just like to kill you. But I've seen fellers ride 15 miles in either direction to pick up a half-gallon fruit jar of some of this home brew. You see, people just wanted to forget their troubles. They wanted to kick back and have a good time. So I was wheeling and dealing there in a whiskey store for a while. Yeah, usually it'll be those rig builders and the cement men and oil derrick workers and the cattle grazers and the wheat raisers and other boom chasers. They'd come in there to pick up a little antifreeze before breakfast. So the rest of the day would be kind of quiet. And in the back of Shorty's store, I found an old guitar. Wasn't much to look at. But my Uncle Jeff, who lived in town, he was a fiddle player. He showed me kind of how to tune it up. And I started to finger the strings, and I thought it sounded mighty pretty. So I asked my Uncle Jeff, "How am I going to learn to play this thing?" And he said, "Woody, here's what you do. You just go out to the country somewhere and lean your ass against a barn and just start fingering them strings. And when eventually you get a few folks around you willing to pay you money to play a song, you know how to play the guitar. So that's what I did. You'll notice my guitar playing ain't nothing fancy on a stick. I try to simplify everything. I only learned a few chords. I'm a clamper fiend. I like to run the clamper up and down the neck so I can stay within 9 miles of Uncle Jeff when he's playing some fiddle tune or other. But we started playing around the town there and playing in the barn raisins and the ice cream freezins and the house parties and all those kind of affairs they have in the country. All the songs they played back then around those places were all about the same everywhere you go. Here's one I learned right off, and everybody start playing this, everybody'd sing along. Rye whiskey, rye whiskey, rye whiskey I crave. If I don't get rye whiskey, I'll go to my grave. I'll eat when I'm hungry, I'll drink when I'm dry. If I get my whiskey, I'll live till I die. People like that song. Then Uncle Jeff told me this old driving southern E chord. Sometimes they just want me to play one chord in the background without moving around too much. And here's one of the songs we used to do. I don't like old Joe Clark, tell you the reason why. He blows his nose in old cornbread, calls it chicken pie. People love that song. So we played around there for nickels and dimes and worked our way up into playing within the city limits. And on that 2x4 bootleg radio station they had there at Pampa. And different fellas came to play with us. And one of them I got to know pretty well was Matt Jennings. He was a good-hearted soul, and he had a sister named Mary. About that time, I started collecting the old songs, the ballads. My mother had taught us all the old songs and ballads. She'd play them on the piano and tell us the stories behind all these old songs. And I was collecting some of those and other songs we was swapping around with other fellas that played the fiddles and the old guitars, and starting to make up a few of my own, just a few little silly songs or serious songs or stories about the experiences I'd had or others had had. I'd learned speed typing in school, about the only thing I did learn. And I started making up songbooks. Figured I could sell them, make a little money, sell them for $0.25 each. And Matt's sister Mary was kind of handy along those lines, and she helped me print them up and bind them, and one thing led to another, and pretty soon we was married. Her brother said that I was the least suited to matrimony of any man who had ever taken the vow. I'd often just get up from the dinner table. I'd be gone for 3 or 4 days. But Mary, she's an easy old girl. She knew how to handle me. She knew how to handle that. She knew that's what men were like, especially in Texas. We stayed married long enough to have no clothes, no money, not much of a house, and 3 children. I was trying to make a living for my family. Everybody told me how good I was. I was painting signs. I was painting portraits. I was playing around with different fellers around the country there, but I just couldn't make enough money to support my family. I wasn't doing the manly thing, said Mary's father. And then something happened. Something happened that had never happened before in the history of the world. And I wrote a song about it. It was the 14th day of April, 1935. There come the blackest dust storm that ever filled the skies. It was Easter Sunday, 1935. Now, we had seen dust storms before, of every shape, color, flavor, model, description. But this was a freak-looking thing. It was a wall of black, a mile high and 30 or 40 miles wide, just rolling in onto town like the Red Sea coming down on the Israel children. And we'd have to sit around there inside those old boomer shacks we lived in. They're none too tight, and the dust would come in around the window frames and under the doors, and everything had turned black. It'd pile up. We'd sit there with wet rags around our faces and try to breathe. We weren't scared. We were too interested in breathing. And we'd sit there at middle of the day, and it was so dark. It was so dark you couldn't see a dime in your pocket. You couldn't see the shirt on your back. You couldn't see a meal on the table. You couldn't see a dadgum thing. Well, we had an electric light, a good strong electric light bulb shining there in the room. And it looked just like a cigarette burning. That's all the light you get from it. So some of our friends and neighbors would be sitting around there with us, and some of them was kind of religious minded. You know, they'd be up on their scriptures. And they'd look at each other and nudge each other and nod and say, brothers and sisters, friends and relatives, this is the end. That's right, they thought it was the end of the world. And they said the fella that made the world don't like the way we're handling it, so he's going to wipe it off the face of the earth and build us a new one. They'd look at each other and they'd say, so long, it's been good to know ya. So long, it's been good to know ya. So long, it's been good to know ya. This dusty old dust, it's a-blowing my home. And I gots to be drifting along. If it was just dust, you could handle it. Because you're made of dust, and to dust you will return. But you could take a little bit of dust for a long time, and you take a lot of dust for a short while. But when everything just seems to fly loose, and you look out at your farm, it's just a dead sea of dust. And the barn half buried by the dunes, and the cow up on top of the chicken coop. And you're thinking that you're never going to get a crop. You're never going to be able to pay the bank what you owe them. Why, you owe the bank probably $5,000, $6,000 for a combine harvester, $2,000 for an old tractor, you have food bills, seed bills, fuel bills. You can never pay it back. You're never going to get a new outfit to start the next season. You're tearing your hair out, walking up and down, wondering how you're going to feed your kids. And then maybe when things settle down a little bit, you're trying to ease your mind, so you walk downtown, and there in front of the dry goods store, some of the fellows have set up an electric photograph. And they're playing a song that's pretty well known in this country by then. A record had gone around, a song by known as the Singing Brake Man, Jimmie Rodgers. I'm going to California where they sleep out every night. I'm going to California where they sleep out every night. 'Cause these Texas women, they sure ain't treating me right. And those boys would nudge each other and go, yes, sir, I had boys telling the truth. California where the water's like cherry wine. And one of them would pull a handbill out of his pocket, wave it around. Now, we got any native Californians out there in the audience? Well, all right. Now, your ancestors, when they come across in the cover the old way, if you get my meaning. You know, I was writing songs about the experiences we was having, and that station, you could hear it all over California at night. Hell, you could hear it in Texas at night. Mary'd put the kids to sleep and tune it in. It was that powerful. Kind of one of those border blasters. Well, I wrote this song, played it on the radio. Lots of folks back east, they say, leaving home every day, hitting the hot old dusty way to the California line. Across the desert sands they roll, trying to leave that old dust bowl. They think they're coming to a sugar bowl. Here is what they find. Well, the police at the port of entry say, you're number 14,000 for today. Oh, if you ain't got the do-re-mi, friend. If you ain't got the do-re-mi, well, you better go back to beautiful Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Georgia, Tennessee. California, it's a garden of Eden. It's a paradise to live in or see. But believe it or not, you won't find it so hot if you ain't got the do-re-mi. You see, it is a matter of having the money. They didn't care how you got it. You could have cheated for it. You could have stolen it. You could have lied for it. You could have driven a family out of their house and home for it. As long as you had the do-re-mi, they'd let you in. Otherwise, they had what they called the bum blockade. They had the deputy sheriffs there, and the deputy sheriffs and the vigies. You know what I'm talking about, the vigies? Wrote a song about them. Have you seen a vigilante man? Have you seen a vigilante man? These are like the American Legionnaires and the off-duty sheriff's deputies. They show up with their guns and their clubs, and they just herd those Okies around like it was white-faced cattle from place to place. Well, that's what happened to them. But we was Lefty Lou and I said that song I just played. They said it has a lot of truth to it. Not a lot of poetry, but a lot of truth. And it turned out that song maybe had too much truth. And old Burke, that owned the radio station, came up to me shortly after that and said, Woody, I like it when you play the old songs, but some of these new songs you're writing, they're a little bit left-handed, if you know what I'm saying. I did. Now, I've always known that people didn't always like what I said or what I played, but I never let anybody tell me what to say or what to play. He said, Woody, I'm sorry that I'm going to have to cancel your program. Well, Lefty Lou, she was feeling a little bit under the weather anyway. She was ready to give it a break. And so I didn't know what to do. I brought Mary and the 3 kids to Los Angeles, and I had to figure out some way of supporting them. Tried this and that, tried playing down on Skid Row and the saloons and all that, but wouldn't make a whole lot of money. And then I met a fellow named Ed Robin. Now, Ed Robin, he was on another radio station. He